What's going on, U-Turn friends? You know, I'm always bringing special people, and Eric Thayne is no exception. He's an entrepreneur. He's the founder of Celadora Studios, and he's a multi seven-figure media production agency that really helps grow brands, influencers, leaders, movement builders, grow their influence and their business with social video content. And he's helped produce over 500 million video views for really well-known brands and industry icons. And his content has been featured by some of the most prestigious online media channels in the world. He also founded Cinema Mastery, which is an online community for filmmakers and video creators with more than 15,000 paying customers in 100 countries around the world. His video and content creation techniques are used worldwide by filmmakers and entrepreneurs alike, which is why, obviously, you all know I am writing so many TEDx talks. I'm always talking to our booking team because we nearly guarantee our clients booking for TEDx, which means we need to be thinking about content. We need to be thinking about virality, resonance. And so this is what I want to ask Eric about today. Thank you so much, Eric, for coming on.
Thank you, Ashley, for having me on. It's an honor to be here. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, you sound like a busy person with all the videos and all of the members in your community. Can you take me back to when did you start to notice that you were really good at content? Like what happened in your world or in your professional life that made you think I'm really onto something here?
This has been something that I've been doing my whole life, honestly. Like when I was, before social media was a thing, when I was a kid, I was making videos with friends like every day after school, come home, like we were making superhero videos and like doing all this stuff. And so video and creativity, art, design, music, like they were all things that I was getting into. My very first business actually that I started was when I was 13 years old, and it was on MySpace. So at the beginning of the social media days, and I was actually doing graphic design for and like helping with branding for screamo bands on MySpace. So we would design t-shirts.
Oh my God, MySpace.
I would design t-shirt designs and like little graphics and stuff they could put on their profiles to like beef up their profile and make it look better. And that was my very first thing, collecting payments on PayPal back when all this was really brand new. And I don't think I realized how revolutionary that was. It was just, I grew up with it, right? And started doing that kind of stuff. So that was my first business, creating designs and stuff like that for brands. Kind of got into branding more so with companies and helping them build websites, logos, just like adjusting their brand. And then eventually moved into, the video side of things and really helping people like create viral videos. We did a lot of videos on YouTube, probably some videos that you've seen before. We worked with a lot of really big companies and helped them to grow their brands by creating content that's interesting that people want to watch and like helping them grow. So, we had videos that got millions and millions of views and helped kind of put some companies on the map. And so it's been my whole life, right? Just like that kind of thing, creativity, helping people with branding, understanding like the psychology of content, where it comes from, what makes people want to share something, how it gets out there, and then what that means for your personal brand and building your business. Because as we know, in today's day and age, especially right now, like this is a creator economy, people want to connect with people more so than companies. And so whether you're a company or a person, you've got to have a personal brand, or at least what I call a personable brand.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately like what people want to connect with.
Okay. You've opened up so many tabs in my head. I'm like, where do we begin, Eric? Like, okay, you talked about creating some content that have really put people on the map. If there's anything I've learned working with so many people, because I'm working with like doctors at all levels, right? Some have a few practices. Some are like huge icons of our time that have written New York Times stacks of books. It's like, I've learned very much so the importance of emotion and being able to like really deeply connect with somebody through a screen. And it's a challenge, right? Like it's a challenge to always hit every single time. We can't bat 1,000, right? Like every video we create, we set the intention, but you can't bat 1,000. So when you look at the ones that have really hit, what are you seeing have made those go viral? What was it about those? And because if you're anything like me, I can feel when a client is going to go viral. And I also struggle with sometimes clients don't have things to say. They come in to book and write a TED Talk, but then when I get under the hood, I'm like, well, what are your tips? What are your thoughts on this thing that you want to talk about? And, luckily I went to graduate school for psychology. So sometimes the therapist in me can like pull things out.
Mhm.
But I found that a lot of people do want to be content creating, but they don't actually feel like they have a lot to say. And I say that without judgment, but because I know there's probably somebody listening that wants to create a brand, but they're also like, I don't even have anything to say. So yeah, maybe we can start with what are you really seeing with videos that resonate? And what would be your wisdom for people that don't even know where to begin with having a voice?
Okay, so let's start with what resonates, and then we'll go to
Yeah.
the next part.
Yeah.
There's in my book I talk about a few different ways of going viral, or like what is share worthy type of content. The number one thing is relatability. And it's always been that. If you think about it, the purpose of social networking is to network. It's the connection, right? We're here to connect with people the same way we do in real life. We do it online with people, whether they're people that we know personally, friends and family, or they're people that we don't know, but we just like following them online. We're big fans of Mr. Beast or whatever, but it's connection. And everything that I teach as far as content goes really stems from that point is how can you connect more with your audience? Because if you keep that in mind as your number one goal, then I like teaching from principles rather than tactics, because if you keep that principle in mind, it kind of solves all the answers of the tactics. Should I respond to my comments or not? Which one's going to provide more connection? Should I create this video, this video or this video? Which one's going to provide more connection? The goal is to connect with people. And so the biggest thing that is going to help a video be shareable, be something that's going to connect with people, is relatability. Now, what does relatability mean? Have you ever watched a reel on Instagram where you go, oh my gosh, that is so me, right?
Yeah.
Or if you're married, you're like, oh my gosh, that is so us. And you send it to your spouse, your partner, and you're like, check this out. Oh, remember when this happened the other day? That is relatability. That is the number one reason why people share stuff. I don't know about you, but my wife sends me reels every single day, right?
Hmm.
Where it's like, oh, here's this thing that we were talking about the other day, or here's this thing that happened to us.
Yeah.
And it's just something that's like, oh, somebody else understands our situation. And isn't that funny how that really is what provides connection? I like to think about the psychology of this, like not the algorithm and the technology and the science, but like psychologically, why do people like certain pieces of content? Why do they share certain pieces of content? And when it comes down to a lot of times, it's that relatability. So when the best way to connect with somebody is when they can relate to you, right?
Mm.
Which, as a content creator, what that means, okay, understand this, is understanding your audience. That's what they're going to say. Oh, this person relates to me. What they're really saying is this person understands me. Okay. We say this in entrepreneurship and in marketing, that like the person who can describe the customer's problem the best is the one
Mm.
that wins. Not necessarily the person that has the best solution to it, but the one that can describe it best to them. Because when
Mm.
somebody speaks to you in a way that they're like, oh, you understand what I'm going through, you understand what my challenges are, you understand what I'm trying to achieve, where I'm trying to go, that is the person that you're going to go, I want to buy their product. I want to buy their solution. I want to work with them. And so it's the same thing with social media. It's like, if you can show your audience that you understand them, whether it's through a funny video that's funny because they're like, oh my gosh, that's so me, or through just sharing your expertise, but sharing it not from a perspective of, look what I know, but look how I can help you. Look how I understand what situation you're in, what you're struggling
Mm.
with, what you're trying to do. And here's the solution to it. And here's what you can do, to improve that. So that
Mm.
is the number one thing, from a principle level. We can get into more tactics if you want to, but from a principle level, that's what I always teach people to keep in mind from the very beginning is like, how can I connect more with people? And the way to connect with people is to relate to them. And so one of the things I always say is that it's not about understanding the algorithm.
Mm.
People get so hung up on this is what the algorithm wants and this tweak and this, and I need to do this and this is what's going to happen. But I would stop worrying so much about the algorithm and start worrying more about your audience. That's where
Mm.
the magic is.
Mm. Mm. Okay, tell me a little bit about that, because when you talk about relatability, it's easy to spot it when you see something that's relatable, but I imagine it's really hard to think about it, like
Mm,
to get ahead of people and be at the pulse of what would feel relatable to them. And this is really resonating what you're saying, because it reminds me of we have a pretty intense intake form about people's lives before we write their TEDx talk. And It's interesting because sometimes we see people who have what I like to call a cheap shot story, where it's like, and I say cheap without being insulting, it's a cheap shot, like it's a crazy story, right? Like my TEDx hit the top 100 on the entire TEDx channel, and I'm pretty sure it's because it opens up not just with a good title that's SEO, backed, but because the opener is a cheap shot. And what that means is that I have a crazy story and people, so that's the loophole in relatability, right? Is you can go so crazy that people can't help but listen, right? Like, we had a stem cell researcher. He just told me about how he was in 2 fatal car accidents and he walked away unscathed and nobody else survived. That's a crazy cheap shot story and it's a very sad story. So that's one route content creators can go. But what you're talking about is a lot more wholesome. And I see it a lot more in my people's intake forms, which is just personal stories. Embarrassing moments tend to be relatable because
Yeah.
everybody's usually been humiliated by the same things,
Mhm.
or they dread the same things, they have the same fears. So yeah, how do you help your clients or anyone that you're working with brainstorm content through the lens of how do they get ahead and figure out that relatability?
I think in order to be relatable, you have to understand, you have to really take to heart one principle. And that is that your best performance as a brand, online and social media content and whatever you do is going to come from you being 100% you.
Yeah,
And that is something that, sounds really simple, but it's actually very difficult for a lot of people. Because to really truly be yourself, you think about what that takes.
yeah,
To be yourself is, it means being you through your successes and your achievements. It means being you through your failures and your
mm,
challenges, right? And it's really hard to relate to somebody who seems like they never fail,
right.
right? And so, yeah, sometimes it shows up as vulnerability, showing up and talking about, I'm actually struggling with this thing right now. That builds connection with people
Mm,
because they
mm,
go, oh my gosh, like I'm struggling with that same thing. I get it. You understand me. Again, we're talking about the same thing here. So being relatable, being vulnerable with your audience. And I actually always say that content creation is a personal development journey
mm,
because of that exact reason. Not only do you get to show up and serve an audience and share what you know and be an authority in your space, but when you start doing that consistently and you start talking, it really makes you think really deeply about who you are. Like,
yeah.
who am I? What message do I want to put in the world? Who do I want to talk to?
Hmm.
And the more you can do that, the more you can show up in that authentic way, that vulnerable way, the more you're going to connect with people. Like we don't really connect with people who have a wall up.
Yeah.
And so if you can understand and take to heart that fact that you will be your highest potential, if you want to call it that, you will be able to reach your highest, what you're able to do. You as a person, the follower count, the highest follower count that you can have, the highest amount of views that you can have, the biggest business that you can have, not somebody else, but you. If you want to reach the highest level of that, it's going to be by being yourself because you'll always be a better yourself than you will be somebody else. You can only
Mm,
ever be a mediocre version of somebody else.
mm,
And a lot of people struggle with, when they get into creating content, it's like, what is somebody else doing? And I'm going to follow them, which, by the way, when you're starting out is actually a really good way to start because you don't really know what you like to do. And
mm,
so, I always teach people that, like, kind of model different people and see what works for you, but as fast as you can, figure out how to just be yourself in a way that's, I'm doing it this way because I want to do it this way, not because I think this is going to perform or because it worked for somebody else or something else happened, but because this is how I feel like doing it and this feels native to me and my audience. That
mm.
really is the biggest thing. And again, I know we're talking like principle level here, but I think it's important for people to understand that that's the goal, is like, the more you are yourself, you have skills, talents, passions, values, you have abilities, you have strengths that are, your combination of those things, which is what makes up your personal brand, is completely unique to you. Nobody else has it the exact same way. And so your greatest power is in being that combination of things, because
Mm,
that's the one thing that nobody else on this planet will ever be able to compete with. There's a
mm.
million other people talking about the same topic you are, but they're not doing it the same way you are. And the one thing they can't compete with is they can't ever be you. So
Yeah.
there are people who are going to resonate with you. They're going to like the way that you do things. Have you ever been on YouTube and like watched a certain topic, but there's like one channel that you really like how they talk about it, and there's another
Yeah.
channel that you really don't?
Yep.
It's just the people that you relate to, and then there's other people that relate to this person. And so if you can find your people, find those people that just relate to you. And the way you do that is by being yourself. The moment you start being somebody else in the smallest way, you're actually generating attention and relatability for somebody else.
Mm.
And at some point, you're going to have an awakening, and you're going to be like, well, shoot, I need to really be myself. And you're going to find, like what happened to me, is that your audience doesn't actually relate to you. They relate to this manufactured version of you.
Right.
And that's a struggle, right? And so then, when you get back down to it, you have to like understand that if I can just be myself as much as I possibly can, what I'm going to create is a following and an audience of people who relate to me. I'm going to find my corner of the market, my 1,000 true fans. I don't
Yeah.
need everyone to like me. I just need these people too. And when I can find that, that's what I can build from. And that's going to be way more powerful than trying to be somebody else.
I think that's really fun advice to like realize like a lot of people struggle to find their voice. They don't know what's going to do well. And to take a look at somebody who is doing well doesn't mean that you're copying them, but it does mean that you're doing market research on like what content is going viral, what does the market want, and then how can you put your own stamp on that and your own spin on that. It is so scary, I think, in the early days of building a brand. Okay, so I don't know if you've written any TEDx talks like what I'm doing all day and night, but I'm curious what your take would be on why one would go viral or not, just from a video YouTube perspective. Because I tell clients all the time, it's not really a TEDx talk, it's a YouTube talk. Like I'm happily not affiliated with the TEDx brand, right? Like if YouTube owns the house, TEDx is the bouncer at the door. We're just trying to adhere to their guidelines to get into the party. Do you know what I mean?
Interesting.
And so I think a lot of people think too much about TEDx. And it really damages their ability to create compelling talk because they're too stuck in the one idea we're spreading. And that's the thing I tell clients all the time. I'm like, who cares about the one idea we're spreading? Why don't we pepper that in throughout? Let's play the YouTube game. This is a YouTube talk, and it just happens to be with a platform that has 40 million subscribers times 2, because you've got TEDx, and then if you do well there, you get on to TED. So there's just so much I've learned about like how to think about writing and how to ask questions to people that don't get their brains blocked, on being deeply moving in whatever way. If you were just an outsider looking in at speeches on YouTube, just for my own personal curiosity and for everybody listening who does YouTube content, relatability, I hear you on that. Topics like doing some market research. What else would you say is maybe the thing that people aren't thinking about that really makes videos take?
Yeah, for sure. And I love what you brought up about the YouTube thing. The interesting thing is that like there's amazing credibility in having a TED talk,
Right.
but like it's interesting for your audience, like realize like if you have a YouTube channel or like an Instagram account, you can give a TED talk every day.
Yeah.
Right. And if you write it the right way, the way you guys teach people to write these, that is actually going to be something that can go viral, that can be interesting, because it's not just about being on stage in front of that audience. It's about how is this video going to live on forever. And you want to think about that with every single video that you make, especially on a platform like YouTube, where there's a lot more intention put into one video, and you're doing them probably less often versus short form videos, a little bit different strategy. But in general, there's a 4-part framework that I teach everybody that I follow in all of my videos. And to give a little backstory on where this came from, I actually, after my video account started blowing up on Instagram and started getting these tons of followers and everything and started working, I went back and I checked out all of my videos, and I was like, let me look at the ones that got a lot of views. Relatively. So I would get, maybe 10 or 20,000 views on every video, but then there were ones that would get 100,000 views or 200,000 views. I'm like, okay, these outliers, these ones that stood out, let me see if there's a pattern to these. And I pulled them all together. I pulled all the scripts and transcripts and started looking at all of them. And I realized that they all followed a very simple framework. And this framework now has become this thing it's not just like, oh, follow this, but it's a very powerful way of planting an idea in somebody's head. And so if I'm going to share this, everybody has to promise me that we're going to use this for good, right? But it reminds me of the movie Inception. If you've ever seen that movie, one of my favorite movies
Yeah,
ever,
it's a great movie.
where these team of dream hackers go into people's dreams, and their goal is to get them to do something in the real world, and they do it by planting an idea in their dream. And this is like the closest thing to Inception in the world, right? So the way this works is by following this framework. What you're doing is it's just a really effective way of creating an idea, grabbing people's attention around it, presenting it in a way that's actually it sticks, and then giving them an opportunity to take action on it.
Yeah.
And so the 4-part framework goes like this. It's a hook, the why, the content, and the invitation.
Okay.
So the hook, number one, I'm sure you've all heard of what a hook is, right? The hook is how you grab people's attention. Okay.
Mm.
So the first part of your video, and not even just the first part of your video, in short form, we talk about is like that's the first sentence. It's got to grab somebody's attention. They're scrolling through social media and they're just like, what's going to grab my attention? Boom. If that grabs my attention, that's the thing that I'm going to watch. It doesn't matter how good your content is. If there's not a good hook, no one's going to watch it.
Yeah.
And you know, you could have the best content in the world, but you got to get people to stop. Like they're going to
Yeah.
move on if you don't. And by the way, the hook, I'll spend a little bit more time on this one because this is really the most important part. The reason why your TED Talk went viral is because it had a good hook. Right?
Yeah.
And the hook a lot of times isn't just the first sentence or isn't just like a zoom in effect that you do at the beginning. It's really the whole angle of the whole thing. It's the story, right? Who did you mention? The guy that went viral that when you're talking about the cheap shots, you know,
Yeah.
those stories
Crazy
of like,
stories. Yeah.
it's a crazy story. Like that's a crazy hook. Think
Yeah.
about, you know, who's the guy that did Fit to Fat to Fit, right? Like he was
Yeah.
really fit, got fat, and then lost the weight to show people how you could do it. Like that's a cool story. That's a good hook, right? It's not a sentence, it's the
Yeah.
whole story.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you want to have a good hook for you and what you do, you can talk about that on like an individual video basis. That's like, make sure that the first sentence is engaging.
Yeah.
It's not like, hey, I was talking to my friends the other day, you know, and we were just talking about this thing. And like by that point, people have scrolled on. But it's
Yeah.
more like, here's the number one secret to this. Or
Yeah.
if you've ever been wondering this, here's how to do it. Okay. Framing it in a way that's interesting, that's engaging. That's on a video basis. But if you think about the hook in terms of like your life and your business and your mission and your purpose, like, do you have an interesting story behind it? And if you do, awesome. Start telling that story like often because that's your hook. If you don't, maybe go do some more amazing things.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, frankly, right? It's like the content that works is the one that is the content that comes from people who have the receipts, who have the stories, who have done the things. You know, I talk about Alex Hormozy a lot. People like want to model Alex Hormozy, like I want to be successful like him, and so they go and they take the fonts and the colors that he's using, and they create
Oh, yeah.
Hormozy style reels, right? And then you even hear people say like, this is the credibility building font, right? Or this is that builds authority. Like that doesn't build authority. Like fonts don't build authority. Like the colors don't. The reason why his videos are so successful is not how they're edited. It's because of who he is. He actually has made hundreds of millions of dollars. He actually does have giant calves, right? He actually like, you know, spends time at the gym. He's got this interesting personality. He's done stuff. And so, you know, I think that's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. And I know this isn't like the easy tactical advice, but a lot of times, you know, I always say that too many people focus on the content they're creating and not enough on who they're becoming.
Yeah.
Who are you? That's what
Yeah.
people want to follow. They want to
Yeah.
know who you are. And so it's like, you know, keep creating the content, but go do more amazing things.
Yeah.
All right, I got on a little tangent there.
No, but
that's
I
the hook.
couldn't agree more because people really struggle with like, wow, Ashley, you worked in counterterrorism under Obama administration, and that's where you learned speech writing. I'm like, yeah, I ate for like 3 years at the Pentagon managing an Afghanistan program because I mean, it was really hard work. And it's not to say that other people haven't worked hard, because that I know they have, but I've sought out stimulation for my own life. And so I think it's not just about figuring out what's your purpose, what do you want to do with work, da 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 da. But I think it's about setting that intention of like, how do I seek out stimulus and inspiration in my life? And I think a lot of people are not necessarily seeking those things out and playing those things out, right? Like some people want to learn Spanish or a language. Some people want to see a country. It's like, go do those things. They give you things to say. And if you want to be a speaker or a content creator, you need to have things to say.
Yeah, you know, the thing is that content creation is so democratized now and anybody can do it. It's so easy, it's so accessible, so approachable that you get a lot of people that like maybe haven't done anything. And it's fine. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like you're trying to do this, maybe creating content is the first thing that you're doing, that you're trying to build, right?
Yeah.
And but then showing up, and the problem is when people they see these successful people in the way they talk and they go model that, and they start talking like somebody who who knows something or has experience, but like really doesn't. And I think that's just as much of a like there's kind of two sides to this, where you have the people who, there are people out there who are renting cars or mansions and trying to make it look like they're something that they're not, which again is not being
Yeah.
authentic. And
Yeah.
I think that's a problem, right? Anytime you're not really being you, there's an issue. And so there's that side of it. On the flip side, though, and this will probably resonate more with your audience, is that there are a lot of people who are successful, who have done amazing things, who are incredible and have the receipts and have built businesses or have those stories, but they're not talking about them.
Hmm.
Or they're showing up on social media in a way that makes them look smaller than they really are.
Mm.
And that is just as bad in my mind. And it's the same thing, like you're being inauthentic. And
Mm.
that's typically like the people that we work with is these entrepreneurs, thought leaders, authors, people that have done incredible things, but then you go to their Instagram account and it's like they just look like a nobody, right?
Yeah.
Not to be harsh, but it's like whether you like it or not, in 2024 and beyond, the way that people judge what level you're operating at and who you are is through your online presence.
Yeah.
A lot more people who know you through your online presence than do through your real life presence. And so
So
if
true.
it doesn't line up, that's a problem.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. And I think I really struggle with that myself because my speaking agent, when I went viral on TEDx and I got all these speaking bookings, he used to be like, Ashley, you're so serious on stage. And it's weird because like I'm kind of a ham in real life. And I think it was that my nervous system felt the intensity of people looking at me. And I took the payments so seriously. Like for me to go from making 5 to 30K at talk because of this TEDx talk going viral and all these people coming to me, I felt like, well, I better give them 30K worth of value.
Mm,
And so that made me very serious. That made me very tactical. That made me very content driven and very much, I started to forget, well, if you want to get through to these people, no matter what you say, like stay you, like being you
yeah.
is that. And it's really freaking hard to be yourself in this world. It's so hard. We do not have a world that is set up. People say be yourself, but then they're like, but be it this way. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like that's just the world we live in. So
So you had a picture in your mind of what a 30K speaker looks like.
yeah,
And there's probably, if you thought about it for a minute, you could probably think of specific people that you were thinking of
yeah,
who got paid that much, who spoke that way in a more serious way, in a
for
more
sure.
serious tone, and you followed that. But the reality is that like they weren't paying you to be them, they're paying you to be you. And that's the
Yeah,
thing that people have to realize.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And yeah, so I don't know, I'm thinking about your hook. That makes a lot of sense. Like I did that with my TEDx. You talked about content after that, right? It was hook. What were the other three?
Yeah, the hook, the why, the content, and the invitation.
Okay, so take me a little more into the why.
Okay, so when we're talking about like a specific video, whether it's a YouTube video or short form or whatever it is, um, here's the point. The hook is designed to grab someone's attention. The why is designed to get them to watch all the way to the end.
Mhm.
Okay. Because you can grab someone's attention. If you can hook them in and then tell them what they wanted to know, the moment you tell them that, they're going to move on to the next video. Right. The moment they get satisfied, like, oh, I got what I wanted, they're gone. Okay. And so in some of this, you have to kind of delay the content. And the way you delay the content is by going into the why, the context, the backstory. What this does is it actually makes it so that people truly take to heart the value of what you're about to tell them.
Mm,
Okay. It's not like what's a point that we want to make? Like you should write a TEDx talk. Okay. The way to be more successful is by being on TEDx. Let's say
mm,
that's the point to make it basic. If you draw them in with a hook by creating the curiosity by saying like this is the number one way to be successful online. Okay. And I'm using very basic scripting here, but
yeah.
as an example, this is the number one way to be successful. Somebody who wants to be successful will see that and go, I want to know. Okay.
Mm,
They're hooked in. Now, if you go, the way to do it is by writing a TED talk. You're like, oh, cool. Moving on. Now I got what I wanted. So you have to kind of delay that. So this is where you go into the story. Now it's like, 10 years ago, I was, in this situation and I was trying to do this and this is happening. And then I did this and then I wrote a TEDx talk and then this is what happened. And it was absolutely amazing. And then all this stuff happened about it.
mm,
Then you can go into what the thing is that you were trying to tell them.
Mm.
now at this point, now they're actually like invested in it. Now they understand what the benefit of it is. Now they understand why this is important, right? Which is why I call it the why.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to hook them in, but then you have to give them the why first
Yeah.
so that they will actually take the thing that you're about to tell them and they'll actually go do something with it. Okay.
Yeah.
We're not just in the entertaining business. We're in the making people move business.
Yes.
We're trying to get people to do things, to take action, to improve their life, not sit around watching videos feeling like they're improving their life.
Yeah.
And so the way that you do that is, but you have to get them invested in the idea. This is where you seed that idea. This is the inception part, right? And then that's when you move then from the why into now the content. The content answers the question that the hook asks, right?
Mm.
So the hook creates the curiosity, the content answers the question, but you have to delay that content just a little bit. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we hook them in, we give them the backstory on why, then we tell them the content. This is where you teach them the value. You over deliver, give them like, here's 1, 2, 3 ways to do this. Here's how you make it amazing. Like you make it so that they can actually take action on it. And then finally you wrap up the piece of content with an invitation to go do something. That
Mm-hmm.
invitation could be follow me for more. It could be go do the thing I just told you to do. It
Mm-hmm.
could be comment this word down below and I'll send you a free thing, or join my email list, or buy my product.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is, that's the next step for them. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't have an invitation at the end of the video, it feels kind of empty. It's like, why did you just like set me up with this amazing idea and then not tell me what to do with it?
Yeah.
And so it's the combination of all 4 of those things that makes it feel complete,
Mm.
that brings somebody in, that gets them excited about it, helps them understand it, and then gives them the path forward in order to take action on the thing
Yeah.
why it works.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting to hear this structure. I mean, I kind of guess I'm using it somewhat without realizing I'm using it fully.
Mm,
Or a lot of people maybe are too if they're doing well on social or stuff like that. Um, it's interesting because I feel like there's a lot of imposter syndrome. There's a lot of not being met by the market until you're met by the market. I'm thinking about the person who's like listening right now and their personal brand is at zero, like they really haven't built their anything yet. They have a lot of resistance and it can feel like you're just like pissing in the literal wind, like putting a video on Instagram or TikTok. And I'm curious, like, what would be your message for those people? Because obviously it takes a while to get traction and nobody wants to feel like one of those weird dreams. Have you ever had one of those dreams, Eric, where you're screaming but no sound is coming out? Like, I don't know if
mhm.
you've ever had that. I've had that. I hope that people don't feel that, but I imagine that they would when they're getting
Yeah.
started. Um, what have you seen as far as like getting the initial traction? Like, obviously, there's no magical numbers of like, if you create 50 reels, you'll get your first 100 followers. But largely, have you seen like, oh, there's a certain amount of time where a certain amount of videos a week, I largely will see people who really have things to say get moving.
Yeah, no, I mean, we find with a lot of people, like you said, you hit it on the head. There's no set amount of time. There's no
Right.
set number of reels. Like you can't, we don't have control over that. So why focus on that? I
Yeah.
can focus on my inputs, not the outcomes, right? And so the input is like, can you just be consistent at this over a long period of time? In fact, this is the 4-part framework that I teach people on how to be successful with content is consistent, high quality content for a long period of time,
Mm.
right? Which sounds overly simple, but there's a lot of depth to that. But it is those things like, can you be consistent? Can you make it higher quality over time? Can you make it 1% better every day? Can you create the right type of content? That's important, right?
Mm.
And then, understanding the strategy and everything, and then do it for a long period of time. You know,
Mm.
I we find that a lot of our clients, I usually tell people like, you got to give this at least 6 to 12 months, right?
Yeah.
It's going to take that amount of time. For some people, it takes longer. For some
Yeah.
people, we had a client that literally blew up in 4 months, went from 6,000 followers to over 2 million.
Wow.
Sometimes it just hits. Sometimes it just works. Sometimes you find the thing. Okay. But other people, we have a lady that we've been working with for the last year, and it's been almost exactly a year of working together. And she just had her first video that got over 1 million views and blew up. And now there's amazing momentum happening.
Mm.
We have another client that we're working with, we've been working with them for 3 months, and they just had a video hit over 10 million views.
Mm.
It happens on a different time frame. But the question is, can you input consistently?
Yeah.
So, when I get people that a lot of times there's entrepreneurs that are like, well, what kind of results am I going to see in 2 weeks? And I'm like, none.
Not many.
Like,
Yeah.
none. Like, I lost followers for the first 2 months of creating content. Every single day I was losing followers for 2 months.
Wow.
And then it was in the middle of month 5 that was when my account went from losing followers every day or like getting 0 to gaining 1,000 followers a day.
Yeah.
Right. And so it just took off. And so it just depends.
Yeah.
But the thing that I would tell people is, I was on a call once with somebody and they were asking like, well, how long is this going to take? That same question, like, how long should I expect?
Yeah.
And I was like,
Exactly.
yeah, usually, 6 to 12 months is like where we want to see growth really start to happen, and they said, okay, that's fine. Like I can give it 12 months.
Great.
And I had to stop them for a second and go, that's awesome that you can give it 12 months. But if you hit 12 months and it doesn't achieve the success that you wanted, or it doesn't hit the vision that you were thinking of, what are you going to do? And if your answer is to stop, then that's the difference between you and me.
Mm.
Because when I started this, I didn't give myself a time frame.
Mm.
Or rather, I did. It's my deathbed, right?
Mm.
When I'm creating content, especially building a personal brand, I'm not thinking about this as something that I'm going to commit to for 6 months or I'm going to commit to 12 months. I'm thinking, if I'm the type of person who wants to build something in my life, who wants to do something, who wants to create things in my life, and I want to be able to get attention for those things and get them seen by people, I
Mm.
have to be creating content
Mm.
always.
Mm.
And it's not, today it's Instagram and YouTube and TikTok. Tomorrow it might be holograms, and the next day it might be telepathic communication. Like what it looks like will change, but people sharing their stories and sharing their ideas and teaching other people is not something that's ever going away. And
Mm.
that's something that, I see this as I will be building my personal brand for the rest of my life. My brand
Mm.
doesn't go away. And if I do it right, it'll actually extend beyond that.
Mm. I
So
love that thinking. A lot of people
you
don't
can,
have that grit though. I mean, or they just don't have that focus, or is there a point where you could say, well, maybe I'm just not a fit for this stuff? Like maybe I've been at this for a year, but because here's the thing is like we talked about, some people need to live more life. They don't have content coming out of them. And I want to be candid and sober about that for people who, and I don't want to instill limiting beliefs for anybody listening, because there are a lot of people who are in the belief they're not ready yet, and they actually are. Like, let's get a move on. You do have stories to show, you have plenty to share. But I think there's a lot of people where they're like, I've kind of not been like living big and like playing it out in my life. And like, I've just been kind of in this grind and like, I don't really have that much to share. What are some things that move your brain around for you, Eric? Because I know for me, I read a book a week on Audible, and it literally, maybe every other week, depending on my pace. I feel like there's some hardcore entrepreneurs that they're like, I meditate at 6 a.m. and I go to the gym at 7 and then I read my book until 10. Like, I'm not like that, but like, I would say like 2 to 4 books a month on Audible at best. And those move my mind around. I start to get ideas that are completely separate from the author. It's just being in a creative space listening. What do you do to get your mind moving?
yeah, I mean, I do listen to audibles, and I do a lot of deep work. I like working on myself.
Mm.
And I think this is different for everyone, but like I do a lot of therapy in various modalities. I do a lot of like I like going to the gym and working out and spending time that, eating healthy, like meditating, reading books, like that definitely sparks ideas for me. I like consuming content. Like I'll spend time every day just scrolling through Instagram and seeing like what's going on out there and what's the conversation that's happening. So all of that for gaining ideas.
Mm.
But it's like you said, you have to find the thing that works for you, and that's
Yeah.
what's important.
Yeah, definitely. This has been such a fun conversation. Is there something I haven't asked you about content virality? Um, I guess the final question I'm really curious about, unless there's something you think I haven't asked you, is lead gen. Like, obviously, you commit to social media. So a lot of your lead gen as an entrepreneur needs to come through social media because that's what you know
Mhm.
how to do. Um, what are some marketing strategies outside of content that I mean, everything ties back to content in some way because maybe it's a paid ad or something, but out of the traditional organic posting, what have you found has worked best for your business
Yeah.
in getting leads?
Um, I want to back this up by saying like I used to spend $50,000 a month on ads.
Mm,
So I know the ads game,
yeah.
and I was a slave to it for a long time. My very first business mentor taught me how to run ads, and that was how I got traffic, which which is funny because I had all this past and this experience of creating viral content for brands.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're really good at helping somebody else with something, but like you can't do it for yourself. And so I had all that experience, but like I just learned how to run ads, and let's be honest, like ads are easy. They cost money, but they're easy. You put $1 in and you see results immediately. Like versus content where it like takes time and you have to create the content and think through it and shoot the videos and all that kind of stuff. And the thing is, my business um, crashed so hard
Mm,
because it was built entirely on ads. When the whole thing happened with Apple and Facebook, if you're familiar with it, but it cost
yeah.
Facebook $12 billion, and they lost a lot of their business and their ability to track people, which is how they make money, right? And
Yeah.
if your business is built entirely on Facebook business and Facebook's business goes down, then you go down with it. And so, literally went from millions in revenue
Mm,
to hundreds of thousands in debt, very quickly.
mm.
And
I've done that. I was a 500,000 in debt for 4 years, Eric. I wish I could high five you, but it was such a bummer for both of us, I'm sure.
yeah, it's not fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And when I say that content creation saved my business,
I
I
feel
mean
the
it.
same way.
And I would even venture as far to say that content creation saved my life,
Yeah.
because that debt, that struggle put me in such a hard place, not just business wise, but with my family and with personally and everything. And that's honestly where all of this came from.
Yeah.
I started to realize that like I can't live like this anymore and I have to figure this out. And that was when I started creating content regularly. And within, a handful of months, actually replaced my ad spend entirely with my business, and then ultimately ended up multiplying it there
Wow.
from there. And so I'm on year 3 now of creating content
Beautiful.
consistently for myself, for my personal brand,
Mm.
and we are doubling our business every year.
I'm so happy to hear that, Eric. I've been there with you. Mine's a little different, but I scaled an online course and I went from like negative 100K. It was like in 13 when 14 when Facebook ads were new. Nobody knew what to do with them yet fully.
Yeah,
And leads were kind of cheap compared to what they are now, obviously.
very cheap.
Yeah. So I went from zero, negative 100K, less than zero. And then I did about 5 million on an e-course in like 2 to 3 months. It was a course on how to get a job. And then I got a bunch of lawyers because my dad lost all of his money when I was a kid. And I was just like, I don't ever want to go through that. And now that I'm making real money, I need lawyers to like look at everything that's going out. And as you know, in digital marketing, there's a lot of gray case law. So for example, I did a beta group and like 80% of the beta group got a job offer within 8 weeks. It was like 100 people. But then when I scaled the webinar and we had ads on it and so many people taking it, I had to take that 80% out, right? Because it's not like 80% of people are getting a job offer in 8 weeks. I can't even track the 1,000 people who just bought, right?
Yeah.
So the lawyers kind of like did what lawyers do, which is like kind of take a huge shit on everything that was kind of working in my webinar, which I totally appreciate and respect their integrity. And that's why I hired them. But because of that, I paused my ads, which I didn't know at the time that if you pause Facebook ads, they don't treat you the same way when you come back. I know that now. And I went from 5x my return to 2.9. And by the time you calculated my team and my ad spend and everything, I ended in debt. I held on for too long, and ads people got me stuck because they would be like, keep trying. You did it once, you could do it before, and hold on. And you're nodding because like, I met a guy who was in the Middle East on Zoom once, and he was about to go through what we both went through. And I said, don't listen to your ads team. Turn off your shit. Keep your money you just worked so hard for. Don't bleed it out trying to fix it, and take a pause and then start a new thing. And he contacted me 4 years later, said, thank you so much for that advice. Like I would have gone under, and it was happening so fast I couldn't think. But I was negative 500K in debt by the end because I just held on and I had this ego of I could figure it out. And I think the ads made me feel like I was like this powerful business person that could just keep doing it. So I don't know what your debt numbers were if we want to just compare our fun. But at negative Yeah, same. It was awful. And I don't know why I didn't claim bankruptcy. I think it's because I felt like it was my fault and I didn't want to feel like I was charging money on a card that the government would have to pay when it was my fault that I did it. So I literally bled for 5 years and paid off the debt. And I imagine you did, I don't know what you did, but yeah. And now my agency, Wise Whisper, I mean, it came out of nowhere. And it's funny, it came after I paid off my debt because it was almost like the debt pulled me down creatively so much. I couldn't even be creative when I was in so much feeling like my back was against the wall.
Mm.
And when I got rid of that feeling, it was like I started this agency and we made our first $1 million in like 6 months. And so it's just so funny what happens as a creator. And people always tell you when you're in the failure, oh, like this is part of your story. And there's going to be, and you're like, fuck that. This is not, this is horrible. And I
It's
don't
so
know if
true,
I'm
but
going to
you
keep
hate to
having a
hear it.
story. Yeah. And there's too many people telling good stories after their failure is over with this like golden sheen on it. And it's really a bummer, I think, for people to not see the truth, which is the failure. And here you are, you have what you have going on. I have my agency. And it's also funny, all 4 years, I just built relationships with people around me because that was the most nourishing thing for me was like money kind of felt like it had failed me. And I had let go of everything, my nice car, you know the drill.
Hmm.
And it was like just friends. And then right when I started this agency, like we created a referral program because so many friends had so many referrals. And to be able to get so many people on stage for something like this, it's like I just never really thought something better was coming. What is your word of advice as we go for anyone who's in like the dredges now and maybe their social media's at zero and they like have a lot to share, but they feel like they're not there yet and it feels really bad to like step into this energy of like here's what I have to share when you don't really feel like you've made it in some way and you're sharing it feels so like hope is such a vulnerable thing, what would you share for everybody?
I would just say that, like, if you think that you have to have achieved something or have some story or something in order to be relatable to other people, you're wrong,
Yeah.
right? So if you're thinking like, well, I haven't done all this stuff, or I don't have anything like significant to share. Well, do you have friends and family who like talking to you? Like, yeah, of
Right.
course you do, right? So it's not that, if you have this like mistaken belief that your success equals your value, which by the way, us entrepreneurs tend to struggle with that. It's not true, actually. That's just not reality.
Hmm.
And people love you for not just what you've achieved, but for who you are. And so, can you latch onto that? Like, can I just be who I am on social media and not have to show up and try to be the expert or the guru on a topic, but can I just show up and document my journey? Because I got to tell you that that is far more interesting to people than you showing up and trying to pose as the expert. People
Yeah.
want to see your journey. They want to see where you're at right now, where they can relate to you and keep growing. I have a friend who and used to be an employee, but she just started an account and she just moved from Tennessee to California, and so she created an account on moving from Tennessee to California. That's
Mm.
literally it. And
Yeah.
within like 10 posts, it went viral and she has like a ton of followers now and she's
That's so
getting
funny.
tons of views and it's just like crushing it. And the reason why is because she's just being herself and just documenting her journey. It's fun to watch. Like that's what people want to see. They want to see you growing. They want to see what you're working on. And the reality is because they're too afraid to do it themselves.
Yeah,
And so
totally.
they like watching somebody else do it because it's inspiring to them. It makes them feel like wanting to do it as well. And
Yeah.
so when you come across, especially if you don't have a lot of followers right now, if you come out and you start teaching people and saying, this is how it is, and this is whatever, like it's just going to fall on deaf ears because you got to understand that most of the people watching you on social media, they have no idea who you are. They never
Yeah.
heard of you. They're like, you have 5 followers. What are you talking about? I don't know what you've done. Like, who are you to teach me? So, and if that worries you about coming off that way, just don't be that way. Like, I've got 200,000 followers across platforms online. Like, which I don't think is like huge or significant, but it's not insignificant. But I still try to take that approach with almost everything that I create, is not necessarily trying to be the expert or trying to say like I know better than you, but rather saying like, here's my experience, or here's something that happened, or here's something that I noticed, or here's what I'm working on. That is far more fascinating, far more interesting to people than you being the expert anyway. And so I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, thank you so much for this. I have a friend, her name is on Instagram is just Jess Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And she started posting fashion videos after 5 years, telling me she wants to do it. And literally everything she does is hitting right now.
Yeah.
And she just started a following out of nowhere. And I think she got 30,000, 35,000 followers in like 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
But she was at zero. So these are still happening. Where can everybody find you, learn from you, grow from you?
Yeah. The best thing is I've got a book coming out soon. It looks like this. It's called Create, Don't Capture. I did a soft launch of this book at Funnel Hacking Live last year to 5,000 people.
Awesome.
So there are 5,000 copies of it in the world right now, but those are the only ones. The official launch hasn't actually happened yet. So that is going to be coming out in September, I believe, and we're going to do a whole launch. So it's going to be really cool. So you can check that out at CreateDon'tCapture.com. All of the principles and stuff that we're talking about, that book goes deep into it. It's not just the tactics of how to create content, but it's the deeper why. It's the deeper heart behind it. It's the deeper branding that comes from like really being yourself and showing up in a way where you're creating, not just capturing. And so you can check that out, createdon'tcapture.com. And then I'm Eric Thayne on every platform. So Instagram's kind of my main, but I'm on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, like all of them. So you can find me there.
Thank you so much for your time.
Actually, this has been amazing. I love chatting with you and
Yeah,
talking
you
about this
too.
stuff. Thanks for having me on.